Hi, today's lecture is going to be on the nervous system. There are two divisions of the nervous system. We have the central nervous system, which is referred to as the CNS, which is going to include your brain and your spinal cord. And then we have the peripheral nervous system, which is referred to as the PNS, which is going to be the nerves outside of the brain and the spinal cord. We're going to start by talking about the CNS. We're going to focus on the brain during this lecture, not so much the spinal cord. The brain can be divided into three parts. We have the cerebrum, which is divided into two hemispheres, right and left hemispheres, which are connected by a small piece of tissue called the corpus callosum. And we're going to talk about some interesting things that happen when that is severed, or things that you can do, or you can do and you can't do because of that communication between the two hemispheres. The cerebrum can also be divided into four lobes, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide in more detail. Then we also have the cerebellum here, which controls voluntary movement, your skeletal muscle. This is going to collect input from like tendons and ligaments and look at balance and all that muscle activity. This is where that's going to be communicated within your brain. Then we also have the brainstem. The brainstem allows you to live, basically, because it controls the involuntary actions in your body. So like your heart rate, you don't think about the beat to have your heart continually to pump blood through your body, or to breathe in, out, that's just something that naturally happens. You don't think about it. Your brainstem does that for you. And so each of these parts plays a very important role in allowing you to do what you're able to do. So let's take a look at some of these lobes in the cerebrum. So I'm going to start with the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe gives you your personality, makes you who you are. It's actually the last part of the brain to fully develop. Our brain develops from the back forwards, and this also allows us to make judgments and to make decisions. It's one of the reasons that people your age have a harder time making decisions that may be a safety issue, because it's harder for them to, that area isn't fully developed. And what we're finding is, at one point they thought this area was, the whole brain was fully developed at about age 12. Now, well, and this is what we know now, who knows as time goes on, is that area, the full brain isn't fully developed until into your 20s. And it could be even longer for some people, but that people, as the brain fully develops, aren't as likely to take risks, as big of risks, because they are able to take in the big picture of making those risky choices. So the frontal area, like I said, is judgment. You can see here from this list: personality, will movements, or I'm sorry, yeah, all these things here within the frontal lobe. Then you have the parietal lobe here. The parietal lobe, you see, has a variety of things that allows us to do. And some of these areas overlap a little bit, or there's multiple areas that contribute to these senses. So you can see sensation of touch, pressure, and so on. The temporal lobe, this is hearing, smell, and so on, is in this area here. And the occipital lobe deals with your vision, which is interesting because your eyes are up front here, but we have different nerves that are connecting to this back area here. So if you've ever been knocked in the back of the head, you may have seen stars. That's because you're rocking that occipital lobe and causing yourself to see some of those stars. Okay, so then let's move on to the peripheral nervous system. And this is going to be those nerves that are going from your spinal cord out. Sensory receptors in the PNS are going to allow us to detect changes in our environment. This could be light, temperature, sound. There's a lot of different receptors located all over the body. The sensory receptors are going to pick up that signal, and it's going to send that signal to the CNS through the sensory division, or the sensory PNS, because this division picks up the signals and it's going to go towards the brain, towards the spinal cord, and then towards the brain. Now, once the brain has received that signal, it's going to send a signal out. And so we need to have nerves that are going to go from the signal out to different parts of our body. That's the motor division. I have in parentheses here also other names for these divisions. But the motor I learned as the motor division. So the motor division has two parts. The somatic, which is going to be going to those voluntary organs like skeletal muscle, which it tells you like, okay, I need to move out of the way, or something's, I'm really hot, so I need to move to a cooler location. The autonomic is are the nerves that are going to the involuntary organs, like maybe it's the smooth muscle, the cardiac muscle, some of those that we don't think about. It's going to send signals to those organs so that to make sure that we adjust to whatever changes that take place. Some special nerves that are part of the peripheral nervous system are cranial nerves. These nerves come directly from the brain and the brainstem, and they typically, most of them go to the head and neck, where they're receiving the information from the sensory receptors, but there are some that go lower in the body. But you can see some of them are controlling vision, or picking up sound, smell. There's facial changes that are taking place. So there's a lot of different places in the body that have these specialized cranial nerves that are sending signals directly to the brain. Finally, let's talk about the cells that are part of the nervous system. There are two main types of cells, neurons and glial cells. Neurons are what you hear the most about, even though the glial cells are more abundant. The neurons are the cells that are going to be transmitting the signal throughout our bodies. There are three main parts to a neuron. We have the cell body, which is like a typical cell. It's going to have a lot of the same cell parts, so with the nucleus in there. We have dendrites that are going to be receiving input from maybe sensory receptors or other neurons. Then we have the axon here, and the axon has well, if it's white matter, it's going to have a myelin sheath. If it's gray matter, it will not. And this is going to transmit the electrical signal down. And then at the end of the axon, we have the axon terminal. You'll see this space here is called the synapse. That's going to be where there's going to be neurotransmitters that are going to be sending signals from one neuron to another to allow that signal to just continue all the way along here. You can see that they're long, and they have to be longer so to transmit that electrical signal, which is really just potassium and sodium ions that are getting passed back and forth along this axon. That's what the electrical signal is. And that is going to go all the way along from, if it's going from in the sensory division of the PNS, then it's going towards the brain, and it's running all along these axons. Then we have the glial cells. The glial cells have an important job because they actually surround these neurons. Sometimes they're used to insulate between neurons. They provide nutrients. They provide oxygen for the neurons. They will actually get rid of dead neurons when they are no longer useful and they no longer function. They provide defense, where if there's pathogens in the brain, that they can get rid of those as well. There's many specific types of glial cells, and they have an important function. But for a long time, scientists have been studying the neurons, and now we're seeing more research being done with these glial cells as we realize that they do provide a very important function for our nervous system.